Hey everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for listening to Alumless. Today is Friday, October the 11th, 2024, and this is the Elevating Event Operations Edition. I am Ryan Catherwood, and I am joined as always by CMAC founder and CEO Chris Marshall. How's it going, sir?
Good, Ryan. How are you doing? The sound on our opening thing didn't work. It was just the video. Are we missing the audio?
Yeah, I had a bad experience with the audio that one
Ah,
time. So I was like,
okay.
you know what? I'm just going to do the theme song for the podcast edition.
Got it.
And if those of you who want to hear the theme song for Alumless, just subscribe to the podcast edition. And, I'll can guarantee you that it'll be edited in there. But on the show, we talk about engagement strategies in advancement. We are live today. So please be sure to say hello to us in the chat section of the LinkedIn event. We really do appreciate it when you say hello because it makes it so that other people can find the Alumless episode in the LinkedIn stream. So we're grateful for everyone who is making the show part of their Friday today. Of course, be sure to ask the questions that you have for Chris or myself, or better yet, our awesome guest today, Steve Rittler, who is the founder and CEO of AlumnIQ. And if you haven't, of course, I mentioned the podcast. Be sure to subscribe to it so that you can catch the 30-minute bonus section from each of our special guests on every episode. We are grateful to Steve Rittler and the team at AlumniQ for being our new partner, our new presenting sponsor of Alumless. We still have the great folks at Protopia, but we've introduced AlumniQ. And this episode is brought to you by AlumniQ. For over 20 years, AlumniQ has been partnering with higher education institutions to build real, lasting connections that drive engagement, whether that's through events, volunteer management, or personalized fundraising strategies. Their software is designed to meet busy, accomplished alumni where they are, making it easy to connect, communicate, and involve them in meaningful ways. From personalized event experiences to targeted communications, AlumniQ ensures your constituents feel seen and valued, with 96% of clients staying with AlumniQ over the long term. They have been actively supportive and responsively developed to make sure that you always have the tools you need when you need them. So if you're looking for a trusted partner that truly understands higher education and is committed to helping your institution succeed, consider AlumniQ, powering the connections that last. Visit alumniq.com to learn more. All right. So we've got a great show in store for everyone. We're going to talk a little bit about event operations, Chris, but I thought maybe we could just kick off the conversation here with a few reflections around what's the best alumni event you've ever been to, and why was it so?
I'd have to say, well, I have three examples, but they all have a common theme, and the common theme, anybody who's done alumni events and large scale planning will know the answer to this. The common theme is always the people who are there. It's not whether the weather was good or the tent was nice or the food was good. Even you'll get complaints if it's not, but the underlying theme for all great events is that the people that I wanted to connect with were there. I had to connect with my friends, my colleagues, my peers, whomever. And the three that I saw unfold, one was at Lehigh in my role in the alumni. I actually went as an alum. I wasn't even in the alumni role anymore, but it was down at in Philadelphia at the Philadelphia 76ers game when they played the Portland Trailblazers at the time. And there was a former player from Lehigh who was on the trail, a pretty famous basketball player named C.J. McCollum. And we had an event for 200 people to go to the game, watch the game. And he came up afterwards, signed autographs. But it was the stories that were told and the people that we met while we were there. At Cornell, it was a scholarship event where the students stood up and shared about the impact of the scholarship on their life journey. It was just this amazing moment. But my favorite one of all is as a consultant, I went to the NC State campaign close celebration. Same thing, 2,000 people. They're celebrating a $2 billion campaign. It was in their main arena, huge event. And it was watching them interact. I knew some of the people, but watching them interact with their friends and colleagues. But the coolest part was when the Chancellor Woodson came out and said, the best way to celebrate something like this is if we just celebrate. The curtains opened up and Kool and the Gang came out and sang the song Celebrate. right there live on the stage. Everybody was like, oh, Cool in the Gang was a surprise guest. So that was my coolest moment watching a event unfold.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things I always appreciate when I'm attending events is the attention to detail. If there's just the little things that were thoughtfully planned and scripted, and the attendee, I mean, as someone I came up doing events, right? Hospitality, and I
Right,
got into
right.
our business through events, but there's some things that you just see, whether it's through the registration process or it's part of an event or a part of a break, just the little details, the little touches that seem so kind of insignificant, but they're thoughtfully planned. And I guess, Chris, to that end, when you think about event operations and like all the work that goes in behind the scenes, what are some of the keys to ensuring that everything runs smoothly? And I guess people don't even realize that it's going so smoothly, right?
Yeah. And you're right, though. It's the details that matter. The technology in event planning, I think, is a key element as well. I'm going to give you a consultant BS answer and go one step before we get to the detail that you're talking about. And to me, it's the question of whether or not you should be doing the event in the first place. And when we advise clients, we have a slide that we often will use, and I've taken it and made it a handout for many of our clients, which is, what are the 6 questions you got to ask before you do anything? And then this includes events. And the 6 questions are: does it align with a strategic plan? What's the desired outcome? Who's the target audience? How are we going to measure success? Are the first 4. And I would say, as an industry, over the last 20 years, we've gotten better at asking and answering those questions. We're doing better in those 4. Does it align with the plan? Who's the target or desired outcome, target audience? How will we measure success? The last 2 we do poorly on, and we don't even do, right? And number 5 is, who else needs to know? Who else on campus? Who else in my office? Who else in my suite? Who else in advancement needs to know that I'm doing this? Because too often we go off and do these things, and we're way down the road before we tell our colleagues, and they're like, well, how come I wasn't involved in that? So we got to get better at that. And then the last one, I think we're so darn busy doing the work we do every day, flying through our list of things that we got to get done, emails and board meetings and other communications and events, of course, that we don't do the 6th one, which is, what's the follow-up plan? How are we going to take all the work that we just did, connect the dots to everything else we do across advancement to make sure that the follow-up comes from that particular initiative, that event? And I give us an incomplete grade on that one. I think I give us A's and B's on the first 4, a D on the 5th one, and an incomplete, not even an F on the 6th one. As an industry, I'm talking about. I've seen some really good examples, of course, of these, but those 6, I think, are key questions to ask.
Yeah, I think those are all great questions. Let's bring out our guest, Steve Rittler, to expand the discussion out and talk about events. We had a robust kind of planning conversation. I'm excited to hear Steve's thoughts. There he is. Hey, Steve. Good to have you.
Thanks for having me today. Thrilled to be here.
Yeah,
look at
thank
those
you for
pennants,
joining
man.
us.
You one-up me on the pennant collection.
Okay, wrong way. There we go.
For the listeners that are listening on the podcast, both Chris and Steve have a pennant strategy where they're behind them. Chris, I guess you switch your pennant behind you depending on who the client is, which often gets very remarked upon. But Steve, you just got all the pennants behind you right now. That way you don't have to switch it out from behind you.
That'd be a lot, because meeting hopping like Chris does too. I imagine that would be difficult, but it does get commented on, and I can see people leaning up toward their screen to try to find their pennant on the wall. So it's working.
Well, Steve is the founder and CEO of AlumnIQ. And Steve, thank you so much for being a presenting sponsor of Alumless. I know have known Chris for a long time. Actually, you and I have been connected, at least over Twitter. We've spoken for years and years now. But maybe you could sort of just kick us off a little bit about how you've come to know Chris.
Sure. And it actually goes back to our overlapping times at Lehigh. So as an undergrad, I was in the marching band, and the marching band is nothing but alumni influence from before you even get to campus, which instilled in me from the beginning that alumni loyalty and alumni involvement was going to be very much a part of my college experience. It was inevitable that I'd become a volunteer on the flip side of that on the way out, and immediately got roped into the reunion committee, which was me and a bunch of folks who were considerably more tenured than I. And out of that experience of seeing what it was like to pull a large number of people together for a really great celebration once a year, I got to know the staff really well and started to really see the problems that they were having trying to manage just the operational data side of things. And Chris, with his perceptive eye for looking for talent wherever he could find it, saw me. So when I started pestering him a little bit too much about solving this problem for Lehigh in the long run, finally said, fine, please fix this for us. And then when Chris moved on to Cornell, rinse, wash, repeat, went there and tried to put on the same show again. And to this day, both customers are still using AlumniQ systems, even though we've evolved them since. So Chris and I have a great personal and professional relationship, and I treasure it. If the professional went away tomorrow, I would still treasure the personal friendship that we've built over the last several decades.
Yeah, and in full, I tell folks all the time, but not only do I love your product, I love you and your whole family. And Steve is my daughter's godfather, and I am his son's godfather. So that's how incestuous this business is. But it works. Steve and I have found the friendship part to work with the professional part to work along with it too. So thank you, Steve, for everything.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, you alluded in your last answer a bit of the next question, which is, how did you come to found AlumniQ? And it sort of starts, that origin story starts back as a volunteer at Lehigh, right?
Yeah. And the line I use a little bit too frequently probably is that the way to get a programmer to do something is to just frustrate them until they can't stand it anymore. And there was enough about those processes that frustrated me that I could take this degree that I had just earned and put it to work to solve a problem that was very personal and meaningful to me. And turns out it's a problem that needed solving at many institutions and not just my alma mater. Voila, business. I skipped over a lot in between there, but that's kind of how it was.
I was going to say, how many years of pestering Chris did it take for this to take action? I can
Not
think
much.
of a few. Okay.
Not much. It's probably over the span of maybe a year and a half at most.
Yeah.
The
other part of the story I tell Steve all the time is that we were looking at our web presence and stuff we were doing, and there was this damn club down in Philadelphia that was doing it better than anybody else. And I was like, who's the guy behind this? And that's where I finally said, all right, fine, come here and fix all of it for everybody, not just Philly.
It's been great, really.
Yeah. Steve, you have a bunch of shout outs from your clients who are joining us today, from Case Western, from Lawrence. Everybody's finding their pennants up there. Pete giving us grief. Steve and Ryan and I are all Philadelphia sports fan. Pete from Kansas City, from Mid-American Nazarene, giving us a hard time about the Chiefs being the Super Bowl champions. So I don't want to hear it. Shout out back to Walker, who's joining us. First time, I think, Walker from Marshall University. Stella, another Lehigh alum from Wilkes University. Chuck, Barney, Deborah, good to see you all. Thanks for being on here. Good crowd, Steve. You drew a good audience. Well done.
Sure. And Stella, congrats on the new role there. That's awesome for you. Welcome back to the profession, friend.
That's right. Yeah, welcome back, Stella. Good to see you on.
Yeah.
So, Steve, what have you noticed about sort of the challenges facing today's alumni teams when it comes to producing events? Obviously, the technology that you have created is designed to help tackle these operational challenges.
Technology's there to help. But the biggest headwinds, really two of them are the ones that I can empathize with the most with these teams. One is there's just not enough people to go around to manage, oversee, and execute the events within the institutions. Any institution has ongoing headwinds budgetary wise, and not having enough time to focus in on the details that Chris mentioned as part of his warm up here, that sometimes those little things will mean the most to somebody who's participating in an event. But if your attention is spread so thin, it's really hard to have and make the time to focus in on those things to make them really sing and fall together the way they're supposed to. And I just, even with that said, what I've seen from the events that we've been fortunate to participate in, quality, that's not the biggest issue. It's almost always trying to drive turnout of the right people. And again, alluding back to what Chris mentioned, if you have the right people in the right place at the right time at the right vibe, it's going to be the best event ever, no matter how rubbery the chicken was.
Right.
So it works. It's all about the chemistry, and chemistry is a delicate thing. The math might be there, and we can look at ROI and all the technical aspects of it that are operationally inclined. But if you don't have the right mix of people in the space, it's just not going to catch fire the way you want or the institution needs it to for the long haul.
Steve, when we were planning out the show, we talked a little bit about the idea of the pendulum swinging back and forth when it comes to technology. And this was like, when we were brought it up, this kind of rang true to me, because when I first took over in my last role that first year, I was like, listen, I want the best technology for all areas of the job, right?
Yeah.
And by the end of it, I was like, okay, I just need the one technology to serve all of it, because that's all we can manage. Right.
Yeah.
And so, like, I know there's a lot of alumni directors, of course, on the show today, but talk a little bit about like the pendulum swinging back and forth when it comes to technology. Share a bit more about what you discovered as you've interacted with advancement shops over the year.
Sure. It's definitely not for a lack of skill or talent within the advancement services folks who are almost always deputized to handle the installation, configuration, and ongoing operation and maintenance of these products. It's more a matter of how many of them can we possibly sustain, given that the demands on those same advancement services folks are report writing and data intelligence and business intelligence, and trying to craft data delivery and move things around from one vendor to the next, and feeding your central systems, which are in many cases far out of date from where they should be today. So that pendulum is one that we'll see them try to bring it all in-house under the guise of thinking we're going to have better control over it. But that's just even further overburdening people who are already overloaded. So we'll outsource it all. And now they've got a massive integration problem that they need to solve instead, which in many ways can be more complicated if you're not thoughtful about it. So like you mentioned, Ryan, you end up coming back to, can I get 80% of my needs met under one umbrella, and then worry about some of those extra 20% things on top of it, and reduce the surface area of integration? Maybe it's not going to be the best product in the world, but it's going to get us functional, and we can work on making the experience better in other ways, not necessarily through that last mile of technology delivery. And I'm saying that as a vendor, but that's just a statement of how this all seems to play out. We'll see it go back and forth several more times in the next couple of decades for sure.
I think that that's probably true. And I imagine, Steve, that as you have developed AlumniQ, you have discovered more and more of the needs of teams, and you've continued to evolve the technology to sort of better serve the discoveries of pain points, right? Whereas you've had more and more conversations with clients. How has AlumniQ evolved over the years as you've discovered more and more about the pain points of alumni teams?
Little insight into the world of software and product development from an engineer's perspective. It's much harder to take things out and remove them from the equation than it is to sit and add more code and add more features and add more functions to a platform. One of the most interesting things about doing this over the last 20 years is being very intentional and deliberate about taking away those things that are not being used or were created under, assumptions that turned out to be incorrect. So as we've discovered what customers aren't using, we wipe it out. We're not going to carry that legacy with us forever. We're not going to turn into the next legacy system that is not functional in today's environment anymore, and instead focused on, okay, we get rid of that, but we're going to add in things that help the overall lifetime and execution plan of an event. We've built more tooling for pre-event things, capturing updated contact information 9 months before reunion even starts, and feeding that information into a central system so that the marketing and communication and outreach and stewardship that goes into volunteers and participants has accurate data to work with. We've built tools so that schools that are running homecomings with lots of partners involved have a way to capture and get that event information into the system in the right format, so they're not doing a massively messy Google sheet to capture that information from points near and far. And then post-event, we put a lot of thought into tooling for, okay, how do we amplify the value that has been captured by this event happening at all? How do we get intel into the hands of gift officers and related contact managers so that they know that their people, their assigned prospects, have already said that they're coming to this event and they're going to be present that weekend. So you know it well ahead of anybody else and can follow through on that. And Also, most importantly, the post-event surveying aspect of it. Are we capturing the right things from the people who participated or said they were going to, but then ultimately didn't for some reason? And we've built all of that survey tooling around the industry standard Net Promoter Score. But as we all know, the real gold of those is in the comments. And we've made a really big point of doing the sentiment analysis on that and delivering that right up in context with all the event performance data for the people that we work with. So they've got really good stuff to chew on post-event that doesn't involve paying their vendors. It's more about, here's the payback for all the effort that we put in to execute this thing. And it's already feeding the pipeline for the next time and the next go around.
Steve, what I love about it is technology organically integrating an advancement operation. You're connecting the dots between all the different pieces of an advancement shop with data, with information to gift officers and so on, that in terms of a follow-up strategy, your product solves many of those problems out of the gate. So one of the things I love about what you're doing.
If we're willing to put this thing to use, we have all the pieces ready for them to pull the lever, push the button, and make it happen.
Well, let's get to the heart of the matter when it comes to events. You guys, Steve, in our prep call, we actually may have used the phrase necessary evil.
Yeah.
When it comes to events, I think our field has been reliant on events to drive scale for a long time. And I think there are teams out there that are evaluating the importance of events. Chris, how do you think about the importance of events in today's mix of engagement strategies? What's more important, quality, quantity? You talked about what's important to you as the individual attending the event is who's in the room.
Yep.
Right. And that's got to be a factor, of course, when we think about events too. Right. But how do you think about the importance of events in today's engagement strategy mix? And then, Steve, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too.
Sure. Yeah, I'll do a quick, Steve, and then jump in. My first take is it's quality, number one. It's not quantity. And I always say do less events more often. It's a little bit confusing statement, but take the time. If you're doing 50 events, do 40 and take the time you would have spent doing those other 10 to make the other 40 more quality and have better follow-up and do better input on the front end. The other thing I encourage shops to do is, if you take the 4 case categories, one of them is experiential, which includes events, not only, but it's part of it, volunteerism, communications, and philanthropy. And take your staff, whether you have 1 staff or 50 staff, and ask everybody to write down what percentage of their time do they spend doing each of those 4 things. Now, for some of engagement shops, it may be 0 on philanthropy in the solicitation category, but there's other pieces of it you do. But take the 3 and say, okay, out of experiential, volunteer management, and communications, what percent does every one of your FTEs in your shop spend doing each of those? Add them all up and see what the balance looks like. I will bet the average alumni shop will have well over 50% of their FTEs doing events, and smaller percentages around communications and volunteer. And I think our industry is going to be flipping over time. We're going to see more communications and volunteer management and lower numbers of event FTE percentage. I think the old days, it was, if you're an event planner, you'd probably be a good alumni person. Still true in some regards, but when you communications and volunteer management, and people understand philanthropy and the impact on philanthropy. That's how I think of it, Steve. So there's it fits into a broader puzzle. I saw you nodding your head. I think we agree on this, but build on what I said, please.
We do. And the building is actually taking the quantity versus quality angle and not focusing it on the events, but focusing on the people who are turning out for them. You're trying to engage a certain quality of alum or constituent via these programs. And is that audience the one that you tried to hit with this program? Or was it more of just, we're going for sheer quantity? I want 9,000, 10,000 people at this thing. That's sure. You'll make it up on margins maybe. But that's like .com style thinking that's not simply going to work with humans with whom you intend to have a lifetime relationship. So
what you guys say to the shop is like, we built our program around scaling event registrations and attendance. Like, that is how we show scale. Like, what do you say? Is that wrong?
I mean, at scale, you can move really fast all by yourself, but if you want to go for a long distance, You need to have more people around you. And I just completely fumbled that phrase, but you get the spirit of it. That's fine. That's how you want to run, but it's showing activity, but not necessarily progress.
Go
And
fast, go alone, go far, go together, right? Isn't that it?
thank you. My brain wasn't quite there yet today. That's it. And to kind of build on that further, though, that the purpose for gathering people is to have a collective experience, whether it was rooted in some past thing and some past loyalty or something that makes them feel good about where they are now in life. Is it's useful to a human to feel good about those things again. And if that's done in the context of what the institution needs out of them, or they see that that's aligned with what's valuable to them today, you're going to have that quality audience to ask other things from them. Like you said, Chris, volunteer management. Well, you got to have people who are willing to be volunteered to begin with. And if we're not able to tap into that as a baseline thing to make the in-person experience of group valuable and useful and a good use of my time, then the quantity thing's just simply not going to pay off ever. And my worries, of course, are for the COVID generation who didn't have a great college experience for all or part of it, because the togetherness aspect of being a young adult and coming of age in that environment simply didn't exist except on the other end of a screen. That's going to have profound and forever impacts on trying to drive that quantity angle up. And I don't know how to solve it other than to introduce it. Well, I'll save that conversation for the after party.
Oh, Steve, Ryan, my answer to your question is if you are 100% event shop, if you do that exercise I suggested and you have a very large percentage or all percentage around event, I think it's time to reevaluate your overall strategy. I'm working with a client right now. It is not exactly in this category, but has a pretty heavy event strategy. And what we're doing there is looking at the cost to create that event. So if we're spending X and we have a certain number of alumni come, what is it per alum to hold that event? If that number gets up there, $100, $200, $300, $400, $500 a person, should you be doing it in the first place? So that's where the questions would come in and start to move some of those resources to other things. And there's a comment that came in on the chat, and I apologize because it's coming in as
someone who has a private LinkedIn account, so we can't tell who it is. But
so tell us who you are, LinkedIn user who said, "I love this line." I think I know who it is, but I've calculated the number of hours. It's about 100 hours to plan a typical 3-hour networking event. Do the math of the salaries and number of attendees, and it gets really expensive unless you do the right event follow-up to keep them involved. Amen. So I was talking about $1 for the event, not even factoring in the 100 hours of staff time that the LinkedIn user commenter is talking about here. It's critical that we look at these things.
Yeah. So Steve, in just a minute or so we have left here in our live show, just like you've got a bunch of your clients who do events and execute really well. Mm-hmm. What are the qualifications? What have you noticed about the schools that use your technology and are doing it the best?
There are two that come to mind, and maybe I should leave them anonymous, maybe not, who knows? But the ones that seem to get the biggest bang for the buck and the best overall vibe are those who inculcated in their alumni as students that this is something that's going to be with you forever, and the people that are around you right now are people that you will actually want to meet with again down the road. And that spirit crosses a lot of institutional boundaries and silos in order to really work and generate that lifetime loyalty angle. And you can tell which schools have really worked that during the 4-ish years that somebody was on campus, because the payoff for decades afterward is visible, tangible, even to an outsider walking into it for just a couple of days. Wow. And the other one that I want to bring up as an example, and this one I will actually do a shout out to Western Washington University, because I saw a comment in here about virtual events during the pandemic. These folks to this day are still delivering almost all their educational programming in hybrid format. Every time they put one on, they give the option of doing it on campus or the option of participating virtually. And their numbers of participants have steadily increased over time because of that flexibility. And that also is for the after party discussion, but we're seeing some profound cultural shifts in time and attention and human bandwidth that drive that somewhat fickle behavior for whether I'm going to show up in person or not. And the virtual option is an excellent flexible off ramp, even if your yield rates aren't quite as good.
And thank you, Jennifer, cutting in for those comments. Not sure why you're not coming in on public either, but we can chat about the LinkedIn settings. But thank you for chiming in there. We're glad that you were able to join us. All right. Well, we bumped up against the top of the hour. Always goes super fast.
Man. That was really a fast one this time.
Chris, who are we featuring in 2 weeks?
So this is somebody you recruited, and I know a little bit. So I'll start it just by saying Sam Frost from Ohio State University, the Ohio State University, and she's behind some of the really cool, I call it the journey mapping of kind of how they bring alumni up under their Buckeye tree, the visual that we'll show at the thing in a couple of weeks. But Ryan, share a little bit more about some of the reasons we've got her on the show.
Well, yeah, and I think the team at Ohio State with our friend also Josh Harriman and Sam Frost have really done a unique thing in how they've reorganized their engagement strategy and their teams underneath to support it. So we're going to dive into that with Sam, but you're going to want to tune in a couple of weeks' time here to hear from Sam and what they've been up to at Ohio State. All right, we're going to move things over to our non-live recorded section with Steve Rittler, founder and CEO of AlumnIQ, so that you all can subscribe to the podcast edition to pick that up. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time with Sam Frost. And thank you so much for joining us and for everyone who chimed in the chat section of the LinkedIn event. We're grateful for you and for spending time with us. But have a great weekend, everybody. So long.
Take care. Thank you, Steve.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys.